It's an honor to introduce our main speaker of the evening. I've known him for a short period, but I've gotten to know some of his story, and I'm excited to hear the rest of it tonight. So let me introduce to you Rory M. Is our main speaker. Thank you, Rory.
Since this is recorded, I'll say for the tape, what an honor it is to be here in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. It's fantastic. I really appreciate that. I'm Rory. I'm alcoholic. Sober since June the 5th of 2010. I have a home group, the Connect the Dots group here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I have a sponsor, Bob Darrell. He knows he's my sponsor. If your sponsor doesn't know if they're your sponsor, they ain't your sponsor. I have a service position in that group, and I sponsor Men and Alcoholics Anonymous. The things I say tonight are a result of my experience. They're not necessarily right, wrong, or otherwise. I do stuff like this because I'm always trying to find guys to work with. I'm always trying to find guys who need help. And if you're a guy who's struggling, please feel free to get my phone number afterwards. I'll do anything in the world I can to help you with this way of life I've found. And if I offend you, I know Ron really wants to hear your thoughts on that because I don't, but he invited me, so blame him. I didn't understand what alcoholism was when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't think that most of us do, right? I think most of us get here with the understanding that we seem to have a problem drinking, right? We seem to not be able to meet the mark like everybody else can. We seem to have that piece where we go out to drink and we don't mean to set the world on fire, right? We say we're going to be home at midnight, and when we're walking into the bar, we really mean midnight, right? And we say we're only going to have four. Four is a good number. Nobody's ever done anything crazy on four. I've never ended up naked on four, right? But right around 3.5, I always seem to realize what a stupid number four is. Four, who even came up with four? I mean, Mormon? Four is like a Mormon number, Catholic, and it's funny at first, as it always is, and then it starts having consequences to it, right? And we start getting all the drunk stories that all of us have, and some of them are sad and some of them are funny, but we've all got them, And then I start that period of my drinking where I start really meaning it. I'm really promising myself I'm going to stop at a certain point, right? And I absolutely mean it. I'm going to stop. I mean it with every fiber of my being. You could hook me up to a lie detector test and I'd pass. I am going to stop at 8. For sure. I am definitely going to be home by Sunday. I might not hit the Sunday I was aiming for, but it will be a Sunday. And I find that people in my life tend to be very particular about which Sunday, and I've lack of understanding, I think. Yeah, as Matt mentioned, I got sober before I was 21 years old. So it's not like I could go stop in at any bar and drink, but there was this bar where I knew the owner of the bar back in Maryland, where I'm from, and he told me I could come drink at his bar, but he pulled me aside when he told me that, and he said, "Look, Rory, but you can't get screwed up in here, okay? You can't get drunk, you can't cause a bunch of chaos. If I could lose my liquor license from serving you. I could lose my whole business, And I said, man, I promise you, I am not going to get out of hand in here. And I mean it. He was a good guy. I felt honored that I felt honored that he was going to let me come drink at his bar. And I meant it when I told him I'm definitely not going to get screwed up in here, and I don't think it was any more than the second or third night I was in there. I'm drunk out of my mind. I'm in a fight with the guy in the band, and I'm getting thrown out without my pants on. And I promise I will not reenact that portion for you all tonight. There won't be an interpretive dance section of this talk, I don't think. And and then I think what starts to happen to most of us is we start to have those times, the I'm never going to do this again times, right? Like the after we start to realize that we can't control the one, we start to have the I'm not doing it anymore, right? And I think what happens is those get progressively serious. At 17 years old, I got an assault charge, and I told my mother, I swear to God, if you put the lawyer on the credit card, I'm never going to do this again, right? And I meant it. I've sponsored hundreds of guys, hundreds. And I've never once had a guy come and sit in my living room or come to my office and sit with me and talk, or go to Starbucks and tell me, Rory, I want to break my mother's heart. I want to abandon my wife. I want my children to be scared of me. I want my boss to regret hiring me. I've never once met that guy. But inevitably, we end up there again and again and again. And I don't understand why I end up there. I don't understand why that day of that court hearing, my mother had just had a surgery and she's coming hobbled into the courtroom and sitting behind the defense table and got tears in her eyes because she's, at her high school son's assault hearing, and she's embarrassed, right? Because she's on the phone with her sisters, and her sisters are talking about how their kids just made honor roll and made the basketball team, and she's like, Rory's the assault hearing's almost up. He's going to get to go back to high school soon, Those are big announcements coming out of my side of the family. And there wasn't a single part of me that wanted to break that promise, but I did it again and again and again. And I don't know why I'm doing it, right? And, I could tell another 20 stories that way, but y'all get it, right? I make the promise. I mean the promise. I hold on for dear life. I really mean the promise, and I will make it to midnight no matter what. And then a much more friendly, comfortable voice comes in my head that says, sober 3 weeks is long enough. I mean, you've proved it to yourself you can stay sober. And then I say something to that voice like, my God, you're right, voice, right? And it's always astounding how comforting my own voice is to me. And I'm back off on the run again. And I do this several times. I went through my first treatment center at 16 years old, did the most important thing you could do in your first treatment center, got a treatment center girlfriend. And, how do you know it doesn't work if you haven't tried it? I'm just saying. And if anyone is in here tonight with their treatment center girlfriend, I'm sure that yours is true love and you guys are going to make it forever. And I just have all the hope in the world for you. I tried to get sober at a church one time and all this kind of deal. And inevitably I ended up where all good gangsters end up, living on the couch in my mother's basement. And, I lived down in Austin, Texas for a time, and I was in this late meeting at the clubhouse, and this kid gets called on to share, young kid, and he goes, I'm a gangster, and gangsters don't need sponsors. And I'll tell you, I loved him so much, I almost asked him to sponsor me. I mean, it was like, oh my God. And I kind of, slid up next to him after the meeting, and I was like, is there any chance you live with your mother? He looks at me like I was with the CIA. He's like, my grandmother, how do you know? And I'm like, represent, baby, you're one of the crew. And so I'm living up there at mom's house, and I get drunk and I get violent, and none of those things are new for me. And mom says, you got 3 hours to get out of my house or I'm calling the police. And this is a big problem for me because I have nowhere to go and I have no money. But luckily, I did have one useful skill at the time. I am an incredible liar. I mean, it really, to a level that, I should get an Academy Award. I've written to them about it before. I'm hoping they'll come back with, give me one. And I'm like, I put on the act and I'm like, Mom, I think I know the problem. I think I'm alcoholic. And I'll even go to A&A if you'll just give me some money for gas and cigarettes, There's always, and with us alcoholics, you gotta love it because we're always ready to make a change if you'll just help me out this time, right? God, we're amazing people. And we're, by the way, and this is just something interesting, we are the only room of people where we feel that we're so amazing, right? Sometimes you'll hear speakers talk about, alcoholics are so smart compared to the average population, or you'll hear people talk about the keen alcoholic mind, and no one over at the Al-Anon meeting is talking about how smart alcoholics are or their keen alcoholic minds. Over there it's like, yeah, the keen alcoholic mind peed in our kitchen last night, And so anyways, I've pulled what objectively I would learn to be would be my worst scam ever. But for the moment, because I'm still here with you people, but for the moment it seemed like it worked. So I got a little money for basic cigarettes and some gas, and I go to a meeting in Brooklyn, Maryland, which is South Baltimore, and I'm at this meeting, and I don't remember a word of the meeting. I remember the one thing I remember from the meeting. There was a young black guy in a red checkered shirt, and he said, "Today can be the worst day. It can all be uphill from here," right? And to the people who are here with 10 days and 2 months, it can be the worst day, and it can all be uphill from here. And I start going to a lot of your meetings, right? I wasn't sold on this whole I'm alcoholic thing, but I knew I couldn't seem to stay sober, and I knew that I had to at least stay sober a couple months till I could figure out a plan, right? And I'm an excellent plan figurer outer, right? And any other good plan figurer outers in the room? I'm not a very good plan executor, but a figurer outer, I'm top marks. So I figure I got to at least stay sober long enough so I've got a place to live till I can figure out a plan. So I start going to a lot of your meetings, and I'm not drinking, and I'm going to your meetings, and I'm not drinking, and I'm going to your meetings, and they're all terrible. Because you all are boring, miserable people. I mean, and especially when you're new and everyone is so flippin' grateful for everything, right? It's like, and we're going to hear from Don used to live under a bridge, but through the miracle of the Golden 12 Stairs, now he's vice president of the bank. And inevitably, there's always somebody who saw a rainbow on the way to the meeting, so they know God wants them in AA. And I just want to punch that guy, because you people are talking about stuff that has nothing to do with me, because I have real problems, right? I've got nowhere to live problems. I've got no brakes on my truck problems. I've got no money problems, no job problems. She's gone problems, right? And you people are coming to me with, would you like a simple kit of spiritual tools laid at your feet? No. I would like a lawyer who will work without a retainer and a landlord who doesn't care about income history. If you can get me those two things, we'll deal with your spiritual stuff later on. And what's happening is I'm getting more miserable, and I'm getting more miserable, and I'm going to your meetings, and and I'm sober just about a month. And I remember it was a month because it was 4th of July time, and I'm at a cookout at the Samaritan House on Solomon's Island Road in Annapolis, Maryland. And there's hot dog and hamburger and macaroni and all. And there's a speaker, and like there is tonight, and I'm sitting there and I'm leaned up on the wall with my Marlboro Red and mean mugging everybody and hate every word coming out of the speaker's mouth. So if you're here tonight feeling that way, much love, you're represented. I certainly don't feel home, I think you all are stupid. And this girl, she asks me if I want to leave the cookout with her, right? And if you look like me and a girl asks you if you want to do anything, the answer is yes. I mean, that's simple enough. So we leave the cookout, and we go meet up with her friends, and they're down there in Riva, and they're 10, 15 miles south, and they're drinking Bud Limes, and they're eating Oxycontins, right? And they're asking me if I want to drink these Bud Limes with them and eat these pills, and now I got a big problem. Because man, do I want to, right? I mean, but I've shot my last shot on this whole I'm in AA now deal, right? Like, I'm in AA now. Give me another chance. I'm in AA now. Let me stay here. I'm in AA now. Loan me some money, right? Like, I've shot my last shot and I'm in AA. But man, I'm watching him drink these drinks and take these pills like a cat watches you eat a tuna fish sandwich. I mean, I'm locked in, right? And something very special happened in that moment for me. What happened in that moment is I knew that if something didn't change very quickly, AA wasn't going to work either. It was going to be like the first treatment center, and it was going to be like the time I tried to get sober in the church, and it was going to be like the time I went into my father's house and I said, Dad, I was homeless for a little while, and not like real homeless. I was a hobosexual, which is where you fall in love for a place to live, and I could pull that off 50 pounds and a full head of hair ago. I don't know how many takers I'd have today, but so I run through all the girlfriends and the buddies who will let me live with them for a while. And, it's cold in Maryland in the winter. So I go to my father and I say, Dad, I swear to God, you let me move back in the house, I'll stop. And he did. And I meant it. Standing in his kitchen, I absolutely meant I'm going to stop. But I might as well have promised him that I was going to sprout wings and I was going to fly around the room and I was going to come back and land, because I don't have the ability to make that promise, right? So I'm going to your meetings, hate your meetings, staying sober, hate being sober. I'm at the cookout. These people are having a great time drinking these drinks and taking these pills. And oh my God, it looks like so much fun. And I'm sitting there miserable, like salivating, watching them drink these drinks. And I knew I wasn't going to stay sober much longer. And because I didn't have like a sponsor, and I wasn't really in any kind of hurry to get one, right? I mean, sponsors, they're just the worst. And, let's start with sponsors never understand true love, right? They never understand that our hearts connected in the meeting and we locked eyes right as she got in the detox center van and, that she's the one. They don't get it. They never do. And, and quite frankly, the word sponsor sounds too much like parole officer for me to be very interested in it, And so I don't drink that day, and I'm at a meeting the next day, and I believe this is the moment that saved my life. I was at a meeting on Duke of Gloucester Street, and again, I'm standing up against the wall, smoking my Marlboro Red, mean mugging everybody, and this guy comes up to me, and he starts asking me some questions, and I didn't know this was what he was asking me. He was asking me if I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous or if I was attending Alcoholics Anonymous, because those are two very, very different things, as I would come to learn. And he starts asking me if I had a home group. He asks me if I have a service position, if I have a sponsor. No. And I'm very fortunate. I was talking to Matt on the way down here. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I would have gotten sober in today's Alcoholics Anonymous. I was very grateful to be surrounded by a lot of people that cared far more that I lived than about how I felt. And, because, this, like I said, this was 15 years ago. You didn't have to be nice to newcomers back then, It was almost weird if you were, right? And, and nowadays we're supposed to tell newcomers that they're miracles and, to keep coming back and it'll work because they're worth it and work it. And I don't know. So I tell this guy I don't have a sponsor, I don't have a home group, I don't have a service position, and he doesn't tell me I'm a miracle and to just keep coming back. He takes a drag of a Parliament cigarette and he sticks his finger in my chest and he says, "You're gonna die, bro." And I'm furious. I'm ready to fist fight him outside the meeting, right? I mean, don't you ever talk to me like that. And, again, young and tough back then, fat and bald now. I got 2 minutes of fighting left in my life before cardiac arrest. And that just made him laugh even more. And he did what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. He takes me with him, right? And he takes me down to Rip's restaurant and with his guys, and they start to take me around to the meetings they go to. They went to kind of the same meetings every week that were all started by this great hero of Alcoholics Anonymous, Tom Flynn. He's passed now. And he had kind of started these meetings up and down the East Coast, and we would kind of hopscotch to those meetings each night of the week. And these guys, they start to explain to me what alcoholism is because I didn't understand that. And I think there's a lot of people who come in and out of AA for years and years and they don't understand what alcoholism is. He started asking me about the times when I would stop drinking, when I'd get a little bit of sobriety, those 3 weeks or those 6 weeks when I lived with my father, or the 3 weeks after the assault hearing. And he asked me on the first day of those 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is, whatever your time, the time you've had is, did you really want to stop? Yeah, I did. I believe you did, man. And then he turned to page 52 and he starts to ask me questions. But during that time, was there misery, depression? Did you have trouble in personal relationships, trouble making a living? Did you have a feeling of uselessness? He turns to the doctor's opinion and he talks about, did you feel restless, irritable, discontent? And he starts to explain to me that the main problem of the alcoholic is not what happens when I drink. It's what happens when I don't drink. The fact that when I start drinking, I can't stop, that's a big problem. He called it an allergy. But that's not my biggest problem. Because if that was, when I was a kid, I went down to visit my grandparents and they were living in Florida. And my grandfather, he was like a member of the VFW or whatever it was. And at the VFW, they were having an all-you-can-eat shrimp deal, right? And he took me and, go buck wild. And I'm 8 years old and I'm shoving shrimp in my mouth. And I get back to my grandparents' house and I'm covered in hives. I'm covered in all these hives and red and all this stuff. And my grandmother's putting lotion on me and to call up home and say, hey, it seems like Rory has an allergy to shellfish. So when he gets back up home, don't feed him no shellfish. He's got an allergy. And I'll tell you what, from that day to this day, I have never been to a Shellfish Anonymous meeting, right? I have never once been through the shellfish steps or, have a shellfish sponsor. When I was 8 years old, I ate some shellfish and I broke out, so I stopped eating shellfish, right? My main problem is that you take the alcohol away from me and I feel uncomfortable in my skin. I feel separate from you. I feel alone. There's a voice in my head when I'm laying there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that voice just wants to contemplate the wreckage of my future, right? It wants to get very upset about situations that have not occurred yet. You know she's probably seeing somebody else. They're probably going to fire you tomorrow. Nobody likes you anyways. Remember that stupid thing you said in the 3rd grade? Let's make a list of the people who laughed at you when you said that, right? And that's the problem. And really when I think about it, isn't that why I drank, to relieve that? How many of us have had the experience where we walk into a party or a bar and we get there and we feel uncomfortable and we feel separate from, and we don't even like the people who are there. They're the wrong kind of people. They're stuck up people. They're trashy people. They're whatever. They're the wrong type of people. But then I take a couple of drinks and, well, these people aren't so bad. Some of them are all right, you know? And a couple of more drinks and we're shooting pool together and we're laughing, and a couple more drinks, we're planning our vacations together. And after 8 drinks, we're starting businesses together. And like, I might not know your name, but you are my best friend and business partner, right? I drank, it was Carl Jung who said that the alcoholic's thirst for alcohol isn't really a thirst for alcohol. It is a thirst for this connection. It's a thirst. It is so I can break away from this thing inside my head for a moment, and I can come out here and I can feel some level of peace with all of you. Or much simpler put, it is so that I can breathe regular. You ever have a period of sobriety and you feel so pent up inside, you feel like you could just fly off the handle at any minute, but then right about that 3rd beer, maybe that 2nd shot, you're like, oh my God, it's the most therapeutic feeling in the world. Like that giant spring in my gut just came unclenched at one time. And so what these guys start explaining to me is that if I have the 2 parts of this disease, that when I start drinking, I can't stop, and that when I stop, I can't stay stopped, then I will never be able to stay sober. That it will get worse and never better. And I will go through this cycle of drinking till I can't drink anymore and stopping till I can't stop anymore. And it will get shorter and shorter each time. And that was my experience. And what they also told me is that they had a way of life, and if I was willing to live their way of life, then I could live sober and reasonably happy and comfortable. And I'll be very honest with you, I didn't even necessarily buy it at that point. But what happened was that part of the country, it's very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and all the men in that home group, they went out to the ocean one weekend a year, and that weekend was coming up, and they offered to take me with them even though I couldn't afford it. And so I go out to the ocean with them, and we have a great time, and we throw the football and swim in the ocean, and hang out on the beach, and we tell some drinking stories and laugh, and they tried to talk some AA to me, and that was cool. That, I don't know if it was cool, but whatever. They were paying for my trip to the ocean. I'll sit there and nod my head about lose my fear of financial insecurity. Okay, all right, if you said so. But I'll tell you what hooked me, man, is these guys started talking about their lives, and these guys had real lives. One of the guys had just gotten accepted into law school. He's now a very powerful, successful lawyer in Washington. 2 of the guys were starting a business together. A couple of the guys were having kids, and having kids the right way, where there's like a church and marriage vows involved. Not the way I have kids, where someone calls and says I'm pregnant, and you're like, who's this? Not that way. These guys were like full-on functioning members of society. They were grown men, and I couldn't understand that because I'd wanted to be that many times, and I could always get the start made, right? I could always make it look good for a little bit, but I could never seem to carry it through. And so as we're on the way home from that, I'm in the truck with this guy, and I said something to him or one of the other guys in the group, something to the effect of, how do I get like those guys? And I was waiting for him to give me some answer about spirituality and God and transformation. And he just says something like, I think we need a cigarette butt picker-upper at the Friday night meeting, And I'm horribly, horribly offended. Like, I've just told you all of these problems, all of these issues, and you think the answer is to pick up cigarette butts at your meeting, But luckily I was surrendered enough where I was willing to take actions that I did not believe in. And as I stayed sober many years longer, I began to find that taking actions I don't believe in is all that we're doing here. So I'm outside the meeting and I'm picking up these cigarette butts, and I hate every minute of it, right? And I'm in this stupid cult. They got me picking up their stupid cigarette butts, right? Let me be clear though. I do not mind being in a cult. I just don't want to be the low man in the cult, okay? Like, I want to be the guy with the robes and the followers and, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to be the janitor of the cult, right? But I'm surrendered enough that I'm willing to take these actions. And what I start noticing as a result of taking these actions is when I start to show up at that Friday night meeting, I start to feel at peace, and I start to feel at home, and I start to feel like I can breathe regular. And then, these guys, they were big on service, man. And they started having me go to the mission every Friday night in Baltimore and pick up the guys at the mission and bring them to the meeting, and then bring them back home. And if I could afford it, to stop and buy them McDonald's on the way back. And I don't understand what any of this has to do with all the problems that I have in my life. And I don't know what being my sponsor's taxi cab service has anything to do with staying sober. But I'm willing to do it. And as I start to drop those guys off every Friday night, I start to notice that spring in my gut seems to unwind a little bit more and a little bit more, and I can breathe regular a little bit more. I start to make amends, not because it made any sense to me. I've got no money. I'm working in a window factory for $9 an hour. And these guys are telling me I got to go make amends to people I stole from. And I'm pissed off and terrified at the same time, which is not a great combination. And I remember the first amends I ever made. I'm sitting there in the parking lot of this hardware store that I'd stolen from, and I call my sponsor and I tell him I don't want to make the amends. And I was very fortunate. He said, well, I guess you can make the amends or you can drink vodka. And he hung up the phone. And I think that's what a good sponsor does, because a good sponsor is concerned with my actions, not my feelings. And I walked in and I made the amends, absolutely terrified. I held out the money, and I worked from you from this day to this day, and I stole this much stuff, and I sold it, and here's some money. And the guy, he was so confused. I think he was expecting Ashton Kutcher to pop out. It was like an episode of Punk'd or something, Sorry. Punk'd is a show that was on this program called MTV where they'd play pranks on people. And I leave there, and I'm riding up the highway, and I can breathe again, and the spring in my gut's unwinding again. And what I start to notice little by slowly is the antidote for this thing that I feel when I'm sober, the antidote for this spring in my gut, this voice in my head, this constant fear. Today we call it anxiety, but that's what it is. It's constant fear. Is this action that I never seem to want to take that's service for others. This action that I never seem to want to take, right? And in the third step, it offers me a contract. In the third step, it says, if I keep close to God and I perform His work well, He will provide what I need. And I used to, some people call that the surrender step. And I used to sponsor this guy. He was a recon Marine. He was one of the first, real tough guy. He was one of the first Marines into Iraq in the early 2000s. And I asked him about surrender. And I said, well, what happened when the Iraqi army surrendered to you? And I said, what would have happened if you found them, when they were surrendering, they had a gun maybe hidden in their boot or their uniform or something? And he said, we would shoot them on sight. And I was like, really? I never served. I didn't know that. And I said, really? You wouldn't give them like a second chance or a trial or anything? And he said, no. He said, because that wouldn't be a legal surrender. A legal surrender means to lay down all of my means to defend myself and do whatever I'm told. And I kind of got a question, and I said, why would anyone do that? And he looked at me, he's like, because we were going to kill them if they didn't. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? And ideally, with Alcoholics Anonymous, I come to this point where I'm willing to lay down all my means to defend myself. And what are my means to defend myself? They're my opinions about how my life should go. They're my judgments and my beliefs about what's best for me. And I don't lay them down because I think it's a good idea to lay them down, and I don't lay them down because the brilliant old-timer who sponsors me thinks that I should lay them down. I lay them down because I know I'm going to die if I don't. And I do exactly what I'm told. And what I'm told to do here is to keep close to God in the process of these steps and do His will. And what His will is, I think, is really simple. It's to do the one thing that I'm uniquely qualified to do, and that is to serve His children. Serve His children when it's inconvenient. I'm a guy who leaves his phone on 24 hours a day because I've been in this program at 2 o'clock in the morning with a gun in my hand before. And I think I have a responsibility to be there for that next guy. especially when it's inconvenient. I always got to have one new guy who's kind of crazy that I sponsor. Right? Like, I don't get any relief. I don't get any relief from, I sponsor some guys with some years and successful business guys, and they want to call me up and talk about their golf game and, you know, their business deal. And that's just, it doesn't separate me from me enough. I need a crazy new guy who, like, he's in love with a girl with 6 days and, you know, it's the best thing ever, but he also got in a fist fight at the meeting and, you know, he cussed out his boss. I need that guy in my life because that guy is inconvenient as hell and he can stop me from thinking about me. I think we overcomplicate this a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. This isn't a process of finding God. Finding God is like going out in a Lake Mead in a rowboat looking for water. If you remove the rowboat, you will become aware of the water, right? In We Agnostics, it says, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It's obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things. It's obscured by my thoughts of me. In the medical view of AA at the back of the book, it says the alcoholic often overcomes his obsessive overconcentration on himself through service to others. All that this is doing is it's clearing the channel between me and this infinite creator. And the only thing that's blocking up the channel between me and the infinite creator is these constant thoughts of myself. In chapter 5, it says, whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity. With the guys I sponsor, I ask them, I say, how many hours do you sleep a night? And 6 or 8 or whatever. And I say, okay, so you're awake 18 hours a day. You're awake, 16 hours a day. How many hours do you spend thinking, I wish I had that truck or that woman or that vacation or that house? How many hours do you spend thinking about, I'm so mad at that guy and that guy screwed me over and that guy got my promotion? How many hours do you spend thinking about, God, I wish I hadn't wasted half my life. I wish I hadn't walked out on that relationship with those kids or whatever. And oftentimes as they add up the hours, they're like, I'm over 24. What do? I don't know. Like, my problem isn't that I think too much of myself or too little of myself. It's that all I think about is myself. And God cannot access me if I'm doing that. And very fortunately, I don't remove the thought of myself through thinking about myself more. I do it through actions that aren't convenient. And my feet have been trained here long enough that I've taken those actions consistently for quite a while now. And I forgot what I was going to say next, but it was going to be brilliant. It was going to change y'all's lives. Somebody was going to go get it tattooed on them or later. When I was about, what was I, 6 or 7 years sober, I'd gotten this job in Austin. I was living here and I'd gotten this job in Austin, Texas. So I moved down there. And at the time it was the best job I had ever had. I was a senior executive in an advertising agency. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever made over 6 figures. And it was the coolest thing in the world. And got real involved in AA down there and got to start sponsoring, but having a great time. And this girl calls me and says she's pregnant, and a girl from here, and eventually, unfortunately, she relapsed after that baby was born, and so I moved back here to try to fight for custody of that boy, right? And as a result of me moving back here, I had to leave that job at that agency, and it's the best job I ever had, and I have no money, and I'm spending all the money I got, and I'm trying to fight this custody deal, And I didn't even have money for an apartment. A very good friend of mine in AA had an extra room and let me stay there. And eventually I could pay him some rent, but he let me move in, And I got no money. I got no job. And I remember back when the Friday night Connect the Dots meeting was down at 6 in St. Louis. I'm driving over there to give a talk at the Friday night meeting in a Nissan Altima with no air conditioning in Las Vegas in the summer. And I'm looking out the window and I'm like, God, I don't know what the plan is, but it's wrong. Okay, it is wrong, and there's been a mistake, and you got to rethink this one, bub. And in that whole period of time, I would have told you that my life was going horribly. Right? I don't have this kid and he's in an unsafe environment. I don't even have a job. I don't have an apartment. I don't have a car with air conditioning. I don't have anything. I would have told you my life was horrible. But had you asked my sponsor at that time how I was doing, my sponsor would have said he's doing just fine. He's deep in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's down at the Salvation Army off Judson a couple of times a week, sponsoring half the guys in there. He's solid in his disciplines. And that's why it's important to have a sponsor that doesn't really care how I feel. because a good sponsor will keep my feet moving in the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, my feet moving in the actions that keep me sober. In that, during that period of time, I remember one day in that process, I'd gotten served with some papers, and those papers, it seemed for that period of time I wasn't going to be able to have my son. And after I get served these papers, I'm sitting in my car and I'm losing it. I mean, I'm crying and punching the steering wheel, and I've got everything going through my mind from violence to I can't handle this. I'm going back to Texas and running away, and I don't know what to do. And that friendly voice we talked about earlier, the friendly voice comes to my head and says, Rory, you need to just go sit and think for a while. You need to just sit and think. I was like, and then I respond to the friendly voice. I say, you're right, friendly voice. I do need to sit and think, right? I don't know about you, but I've never once sat by myself and thought and spiraled upward, right? Like, it is always a spiral in one very specific direction. And very fortunately, my feet had been trained in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had made a commitment. It was a Thursday night, and I'd made a commitment that night to go pick up these 3 guys I was sponsoring at the Salvation Army and take them to the Thursday night meeting at the KCB Club. We used to have a young people's meeting up there back in the day. And there is not one single part of me that wants to go do this, but my feet had been trained here. And I'm a big believer that commitments are non-negotiable. They're spiritual. It's a spiritual principle. So I go down to the Salvation Army and I get these 3 guys in my car and we start heading up to the meeting. And this one guy, Mike, he's having some trouble and he starts getting emotional. I say, Mike, what's going on? Mike had just gotten out of prison and he said something like, Roy, I don't think I'm ever going to see my daughter again. And now he's losing it. And I'm trying to talk to him and I'm trying to help him out. And what I notice is yet again, the voice in my own head, the voice of my own fears, the voice of myself is starting to quiet down. And the spring of my gut and the anxiety in my gut is starting to unwind. And see, by the time we get up to the meeting, Mike and I are breathing regular again. And then by the time we leave the meeting, we go get some cheeseburgers and we're laughing again. We drop them off at, the Salvation Army and go about my business. And what's crazy is that was almost 9 years ago. Mike and I are both still sober today, and we both have sole custody of those kids today. But it's very kind. But let me be clear, there's plenty of people that they don't get their kids back in AA and they don't, the situation doesn't turn out well. That's not the miracle of AA. The miracle of AA is that through the actions of this program, I was able to keep moving forward through at what that time was the scariest time of my life. I don't always talk about this part of my story, but I've got a little time, so I will. As a result of losing that job, I started a business, and by the time, and I started that business at 7 years sober, I guess, and by the time I was 9 years sober, that business became wildly successful, and we were featured in magazines as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in America. At our peak, we had 4 offices across the United States, staff of 35 people, millions of dollars in revenue, and I'm getting everything that I want, right? I mean, there's that line in chapter 5 where it says he's a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well. And I'm managing on the outside very, very well, right? I've got a big house in West Austin, got properties all over the Southwest, and all the stuff, right? All the stuff that I would have told you would absolutely make me happy. And as all that stuff is happening, I'm little by slowly starting to walk away from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I never once stood up and said, I don't need AA anymore, or, I don't want to be in AA. And it was never that. I would have told you I loved AA. What happens is one little thing at a time became more important than Alcoholics Anonymous. One little business deal became more important than a meeting. One little business trip became more important than a home group, right? And a couple of years go by and I've amassed this beautiful life on the outside, and I've gone from a guy who sponsors 10, 15 guys to a guy who sponsors no guys. Guy who goes to a meeting almost every day to a guy who goes to a meeting every other month. Guy who calls a sponsor a few times a week to a guy who calls a sponsor once every 6 months. And I'm in this level of depression that I had never experienced before in sobriety. And see, when you're newly sober and depressed, it kind of makes sense, right? Like when I'm living in mom's basement and I hate my life, it makes sense. I get it. I'd hate my life too, right? This gets it. But when you're sitting there and you've got the awards and the trophies and the stuff, and you can't shake the feeling of putting a gun in your mouth. It feels worse in my experience. And I remember sitting there with the award we'd gotten for being one of those fastest growing businesses on the shelf, sitting on the floor with a Mossberg shotgun in my mouth and tears in my eyes with over a decade of sobriety. Because if you take me away from this thing, if you take me away from Alcoholics Anonymous, what happens is against my own will, I become the top priority in my life again. And when I'm the top priority in my life again, without fail, there comes the depression, the self-consummation, the misery, the anxiety. And as a result, what happened around that time, the gentleman who sponsored me for many years, who's a great member of AA, Charlie Parker, passed away. So I find myself in this place where I don't know what to do, because I've got at this time over a decade sober. I want to kill myself. My sponsor's passed, and God kind of divinely moves through our lives. I ended up at my sponsor's. I wasn't even living here at the time. I was living in Texas, and I had to come out here on some business because we had an office here. And I wound up at my sponsor's house. He used to have a big book study there, and he comes up to me, and he'd heard my sponsor had passed, and he said, "Oh, sorry to hear about Charlie, and who's going to sponsor you now?" And I give him some brilliant answer about how I'm going to fly around the country and I'm going to interview people for the honor of sponsoring me. Yeah. And if anyone would like that honor, I take deposits in advance. And my sponsor, if any of you know him, he just gives. Guy like you doesn't stay sober without a sponsor very long. Starts to walk away, right? And I grab him. Bob, I'll do whatever you say if you'll sponsor me. And he took that really seriously, right? I didn't mean it that seriously when I said it, but he took it really seriously. And that man showed me how to live a level of Alcoholics Anonymous that even though I'd been very involved before, I hadn't lived. I wear a jacket and a tie when I speak at podiums, and I wear a jacket and a tie when I speak on my home group, when I attend my home group Monday nights. Not because God cares if I'm in a jacket and a tie, and not because anyone in this room cares that I'm in a jacket and a tie, but to remind me that I need this thing we're doing here, and this thing doesn't need me. And I owe this every level of respect that I can muster here. I'd gotten in a business deal, and my company screwed up on a job, and the customer was out $36,000, and they didn't know they were out $36,000. And I don't know about you, but when your money's in my bank account for long enough, it looks a lot like my money. And I call my sponsor and I tell him what's going on, and I'm trying to think of, and I tell him, like, maybe I'll just give him a little bit of the money back, and I'll tell him it's like a credit for being a good customer, you know. And my sponsor, he's so one way about everything, you know. And he's like, you need to pay all the money back right now. So I pay him all the money back. And I had around coming out of that period, I owed the IRS about $200,000. And this isn't anywhere in the big book, guys, but it's just a good piece of trivia for you. You can, you know, when you go home tonight and your husband or wife asks, what'd you learn in AA tonight? You can tell them, well, dear, this is what I learned. And so this is a fact for all of you. If you spend far more money than you make over a considerable period of time, you will end up tremendously in debt. Do what you will with that information. So I owe the IRS $200,000, and I called my sponsor about it. And I actually called him because I was mad that they would only give me a 2-year payment plan and not a 5-year payment plan. And my sponsor goes, could you pay it all right now? Yeah, if I want to eat cat food when I retire, I guess, you know. Perfect, pay it all right now, call me back. And there's moments you know you got the wrong sponsor, you know. But I try and live a reasonably sponsor-directed life. So I call them up and I pay all the money, and had to liquidate some retirement stuff, and I pay all the money, and I didn't even I thought like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done, right? And it wasn't until months later I realized that my sponsor knew something I didn't. That money will come and go, and I'd make back the $200,000, right? And I'd survive that. Even if I didn't, I'd survive it. But what I might not survive was the years of the fear of, if I was late on their payment, they'd put a lien on my house. The years of the fear. And the most important thing that my sponsor has taught me, I think, is the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous and how important they are. I'm going to offend some of you probably, and again, take it up with Ron, please. We've gotten into a time in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, where we're missing the mark a little bit. We're beginning to glorify, and Matt put it so beautifully, and I'm going to steal that line and claim it was mine from now on, where we've made it about becoming a somebody and not becoming a nobody. Because when I'm a nobody, I feel perfectly at peace with all of you. Doesn't matter where you're from, your background, how long you're sober, what you do for a living. I'm one of the group. I'm one of the rest of you. But in this age of podcasts and all this kind of stuff, recovery podcasts, all this kind of stuff, we've made it about becoming a somebody. We've made it about getting big, being important. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if this is your experience, but it's mine. All the guys that I've known who've relapsed with substantial sobriety with 5 or 10 or 20 years, they did it after their lives were the biggest. They didn't do it when they went broke. They didn't relapse when they got the divorce or when they got the cancer. They relapsed when they got that great job, made that big pile of money, got that new car, because just like me, they started walking away from AA. Because when I was somebody, I needed you a lot less. When I'm nobody, I need to be right here with my people. I was given a talk down in San Antonio. I do a little bit of speaking around the country, and that's fun sometimes. And I was given this talk down in San Antonio, and they called me up and they said, we'd like you to send a picture of yourself and a biography. We're going to put it on our website for this big deal we got coming up. And I said, well, why would you do that? And they said, well, we've heard your story. You're a successful business guy and all this stuff. And I felt kind of weird about it. I said, I don't know about that. Let me get back to you on it. And I called my sponsor and I said, what do you think about this? And he said, no. He said, if they tell them no, and you're happy to not speak if they'd like not, be respectful of their group. But we got to stand for our traditions. And I called him back and I said, I'm not trying to say anything about your group, but I'm not okay with that, because the speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous is no more important than the guy who's cleaning the floors. And ultimately what happens is when we start to glorify the speaker, not only is it bad for the meeting, it's bad for the speaker, because I start to become a somebody in my mind. I was given a talk in Austin one time at the Citywide group. It's their biggest group down there, and they didn't have, after the talk ended, they didn't have enough people to clean up afterwards. And I take off my tie and I'm there stacking the chairs with everybody. And I'll tell you what, I felt so a part of and so at home right here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've had other times, let's be very clear, I've had other times where I've given a talk and I'm like, that's right, now come thank me for saving your lives, I don't feel a part of then. Far be it for me to tell anyone how to operate their group of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think we should all strive. And I'll shut up with this. In the last line of the 12th tradition, it says, so that our great blessings may never spoil us. And when you see people who relapse after years and years of sobriety, it's because their great blessings have spoiled them. They've become somebody instead of being nobody. I would very much encourage your group to not post people's videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I ask that you allow me and help me to continue to be a nobody, because when I'm a nobody, I fit right here with you all, and I love you all very much. Thank you.